Hey, it's Clay. Welcome to another League of Legends video. This time we're doing a patch analysis for patch 4.3, the latest patch on League of Legends. Let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to just jump into the champion changes and the item changes and spend most of my time talking about that. So Vel'Koz has been released. I have not had a chance to play him yet. It's always kind of crazy because I feel like I really want to cover champion releases pretty thoroughly, but it's just nuts. Whenever champions come out, there's just like everybody wants to play them, and it gets all crazy. But I am excited to see him. I think he looks very interesting. He's going to have, I feel like he'll have a lot of damage. He'll be very combo based. You know, definitely linking his abilities together to proc his passive with the true damage quite a bit is going to be very important. And he's got, 4 damaging spells, so that's quite a bit. Fairly long range, and more of a classic, combo-based damage mage is probably the best way. He doesn't have any sort of escapability or mobility, so that's going to be a setback and limit his options in terms of, his playstyle. But I think he'll be interesting. I'm kind of excited to try him out, so keep an eye out for that. Corki has been one of the worst AD carries since his nerfs to his ultimate. And then they also changed his Q. It used to be like an instantaneous drop of damage, and then they actually changed it so it's more of like a lobbed skill shot, I believe is the term that they used. But that was kind of a massive nerf because now I feel like it's extremely easy to dodge, and so Corki just feels very underwhelming. So they're adding a 0.5 bonus AD ratio to his Q, which I think makes a lot of sense. As for an AD carry, it doesn't really make much sense to have abilities that only scale off of ability power, because you're never going to really build ability power. So this will help a little bit with his early laning presence. You still have to try and land his Qs, but at least when you do, they'll hit a little bit harder. So I think this is a move in the right direction, and it makes a lot of sense. Just, AD carries should have AD ratios in my mind, so works for me. Gragas. So Gragas has been one of the strongest mid laners. I actually think he's extremely powerful in solo queue. He really has very few weak matchups. He's got great burst. He's got great wave clear. He's got tremendous teamfight potential with his displacement from his ultimate. Got strong sustain. Got good mobility. He's just got a lot of tools, which make him kind of hard to deal with. Now, these changes are going to be more of like a temporary tone down, while I think in the future they're going to try and solidify him as more of an AP brawler, rather than just a mage, which makes sense, because he does have like kind of a split identity. His Q and his R have these massive AP ratios, but then like with his W and his E, that kind of makes him more of like a in-your-face tanky kind of guy. So a little bit of a split personality there. But anyways, so the changes that they're making is they are making the attack damage ratio on his E scale up with level. So, and if you'll notice, for the first 4 levels it's less, but then at the very highest level it's actually slightly more, from 0.66 up to 0.7. So this will be a nerf to his early game, but then a very small buff to his late game body slams, which I think is a fine change. Now note that this is a total attack damage ratio, so this will take into account his base attack damage as well as the attack damage he gets from his W. So some solid, the AD ratio on his body slam is fairly influential, because he'll have almost 200 attack damage with his maxed out W. So I believe that I've seen Gragas players in the LCS max Q first, W second, E third. So for that kind of playstyle, this will definitely be a little bit of a nerf. If you max E second, then, which you probably would want to do now that the AP ratio is the AD ratio is as it is. So a little bit of a nerf to his early laning, just to kind of tone down his trading potential and his all-in. And then they're reducing the ability power ratio by 0.1 on his ultimate and changing the mana cost to 100. So just pretty much a straight up nerf, a small one. So Gragas will still be really strong in my mind, but just kind of toning him down a little bit, which I think is deserved, because he is very powerful and he doesn't really have too many weaknesses. So I think that these are deserved changes. Kassadin. There is a Kassadin rework coming. Kassadin, I don't think I've ever seen one champion be so universally banned for so long as Kassadin. He has been a problem in solo queue for, it seems like forever now. Like I don't remember exactly, was this like towards the end of Season 3 that he started to rise up as this, just solo queue terror? And it's this situation where, his win rate isn't like absurdly high. I mean, it's high, but it's not like, Janna high. She was at like 54, 55% for a while. But it's like, we've all played in these games where Kassadin just like starts blinking all over the place and he's always there and you just die over and over again. And anytime anybody on your team gets caught out of position even a little bit, it just ends up being like an ace. And that's the thing about Kassadin, that because he has got a free flash every 5 seconds, if somebody gets picked off or gets caught out of position, you're not just going to lose that one person, but Kassadin's going to track down your whole team. Once you give him an inch, he takes a mile. So, yeah, he needs to be changed. So they're just straight up nerfing his numbers, reducing the max rank 220 to 200, a small nerf to his Q. Silence is being reduced by a half second at all ranks, small nerf. And then the damage on his E is also reduced at the max rank by 40. So, just straight up nerfs to his damage, his base damage, which, are deserved, but I still think he'll be powerful. Who knows, maybe we'll see the bans kind of be lifted a little bit now that his damage isn't quite so high, but I still feel like he's still, his core strengths are still in place, and he still has his high AP ratios on his Q and his E, so I don't necessarily think he'll stop being banned or strong. Just a little bit less crazy. Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix has also been a champion that I have been banning permanently over the last month. With the change to the jungle items, giving them the percentage sustain, he has become a monster in the jungle. It makes him, his clears are really fast once he gets his Elder Lizard. He has really, really strong damage. He's got great ganks. He's just a really, really powerful jungler. And so they're just toning down his damage. His evolved Q, which is generally what most people will evolve first, the missing health has been toned down from 8% to 6%, and the maximum damage burst monsters has gone from 200 to 100. So this is like a very core hit to his playstyle. His Q damage is insane. When somebody gets low, he can take them out very easily. And then also, this is kind of a big deal right here, because Kha'Zix damage against Baron, against Dragon, against the buffs is absurdly high. And so this is really going to tone that down a little bit more, and kind of, he has had such great objective control. If you get like Kha'Zix and somebody like Vayne, who has like building a Blade of the Rune King or something, you can like 2-man Baron at 25 minutes, and it's pretty nuts. So, gonna tone that down a little bit. And then the big change is right here on his leap. The bonus attack damage ratio has been reduced from 0.8 to 0.2. This is a massive change. Bonus attack damage ratio going from 0.8 to 0.2 is a very, very large reduction in damage. And the thing about this is that, especially in late game team fights, Kha'Zix will have much less presence, because his leap is really the thing that he uses to kind of move around and get resets, and by pretty much gutting the damage and only using it now as a gap close, his only damage source is going to be his Q and his W, and mostly just his Q. So a little bit of a heavy nerf to that, his ability to just kind of jump in, absolutely erase somebody and then just kind of keep jumping and, eventually finish off your entire team will be limited. So I think the biggest change is right here. And then to kind of compensate for these nerfs, they're giving him some, his R is going to be a little bit better. So when you activate your ultimate, he will ignore unit collision. So that's going to help him kind of move around and get away safely. Basically, his R is his get out of jail free card. So when you use your E to get in, use your Q and your W for damage. Say you assassinate the AD carry, then if you want to get out of the middle of their team, you use your R. So this is going to help with that. Just kind of give him some more options in terms of getting away. And then they're also incentivizing you to evolve his ultimate, because they're giving you an extra second of Void Assault duration. So the stealth is going to be for 1 more second. And I think that this is interesting because, your Q and your E are obviously the best 2 skills to evolve, first and second. And there may be situations where you want to do E first, but I think Q first is probably standard. But then your third evolution is more up in the air. But if you want to do W for the wave clear, if you want to do your ultimate for the safety and the escapability, I kind of feel like you have a little more of an incentive to evolve your R now. So I guess we'll see how this change affects him. Definitely a nerf. I still think he'll be powerful. I mean, his Q nerf was a little bit minor in terms of assassinating champions. And he did get a little bit more of an options with his ultimate to get out safely, so we'll just kind of have to see. But this, I think, is the big nerf right here. Ryze, they nerfed him, a couple of patches back, and he went, in Season 3, he was one of the power picks in mid lane. He's a champion who scales extremely hard into late game. He, has this fantastic combination of, damage, and then because his damage scales off of mana, a lot of mana items provide a lot of tankiness, so he becomes very tanky with high damage. But, they cut down his range on all of his basic abilities down to 600, and it just kind of crippled his laning. Especially with champions like Ziggs or Gragas, he just has a really hard time because he can never get in range and trade with him. So they're giving him some more base health, and they're increasing his range by his overload by 25. So definitely some main, this base health increase is nice because it helps him to be a little bit more durable in lane. And a base health increase is also really nice because he generally buys a lot of resistances. Frozen Heart, Spirit Visage are pretty core items on Ryze, and so, with those two providing a lot of resistances, having higher base health is going to help those resistances go further. And then his Q is his main damage spell, so having 25 more range is quite nice. So, some nice changes to Ryze. And then there's also a tier buff that I'll get to later. I think Ryze could be, back in a bit of a stronger place. I know I think Ryze is pretty fun and pretty powerful, and I would really like to start playing him some more in mid and also in top lane. I think he could be a strong choice. So, good stuff here for Ryze players. Skarner. The Skarner rework, I think, was overall pretty underwhelming, so they're just kind of further tuning his numbers to help him out. Mana cost on his Q has been reduced. That's pretty insignificant. I mean, we're only talking about like 4 mana or something like that, so not a huge deal. But then the slow on his Fracture, his E is, I believe, his 1-point skill, and they're changing it from a 30 to a 45% slow, and then at max rank, 50 to 65. So this, definitely makes your E just a flat-out better ability. We'll see if Skarner actually becomes a power pick. I've heard some people refer to him as like a poor man's Vi. I think I heard St. Vicious say that. And I think that's pretty accurate. His ultimate is pretty strong, but, just the big key is, like, can he be effective pre-6? And now that his 1-point skill is better, I think that could help him out some. So, I don't know. Maybe for Skarner players, maybe this will help the rework work out a little bit better for you. Next up is Teemo. Teemo has been seeing a very strong surge in popularity in power in Season 4 because of the changes to Vision, and specifically Vision removal, because you no longer have Oracle's Elixir, or Pink Wards are a little bit more, you can see them, and they can be taken out a lot easier. It's just really, really hard to remove his traps. And basically the idea with Teemo is that you build a bunch of ability power, and you shroom up Baron, like, you just put endless amounts of mushrooms across Baron, and then you basically win the game through map control. Because, if the enemy wants to come fight you, they're going, if an 80 carry hits 2 or 3 mushrooms, he's pretty much dead. So, all they're doing is reducing the ability power ratio by 0.3, which is a fairly solid nerf, but I think it's deserved. It's one of those weird things where, because there's a change in Vision, his shrooms are a lot stronger, and so they have to nerf them. But if they're going to keep Vision the way they are, something needed to be done to reduce his power a little bit. He's still probably going to build Leandries, and this doesn't change that damage at all. So with, Leandries and a lot of Magic Pen, the damage on his mushrooms is still going to be really strong, but at least in terms of, like, flat AP, not quite as amazing. I wonder if this will shift to Teemo's build to more of, like, Magic Penetration and on-hit build. Maybe we'll see more of like a Nashor's Tooth, Lichbane, Leandries, maybe for some, just kind of amplify the damage on his E instead of relying so much on your traps. I guess we'll just have to see. But definitely a nerf to Teemo, and I think it was deserved. And then Yasuo. Yasuo has been very powerful. It's very interesting to see how, when he was released, people were really, he had like a 40% win rate within his first week. He thought he was terrible. But now that people have learned to play him and he's gotten more exposure in the LCS, he's been a pretty powerful pick in the LCS when you build a team comp around him. I know I was playing a ranked 3s match the other day, and they had a Vi and a Yasuo, and there was literally nothing we could do. Vi would ult somebody, and then Yasuo would ult them, and it was just over at that point. But it's just a straight-up nerf to him. to his shield. I've always said that Yasuo's passive is his strongest part of his kit because he gets the 2 times crit, and he also gets the shield. That is definitely the best part about his kit. And the shield duration has been reduced by a half second, and then the shield values have been reduced quite significantly. If you look at the max rank, I mean, look at about here, 420, and then with 1, 2, 3, within 3 levels, it almost doubles up to almost 700. So his late game shield was bananas, and now it is just much lower in terms of scaling, and it's basically just going to make him a lot more fragile. So he's going to be more of an assassin. You have to really pick your moment to go in and get rid of all your damage, instead of being somebody who, especially with the last change where they made it so whenever he ults, his shield is immediately refreshed. You could get 2, maybe 3 instances of your shield off during a team fight, and it just makes you really tanky. So this is definitely going to hit that pretty hard and bring him a little more in line with, I think, if you're going to build Glass Cannon, you should be risky. So definitely hitting his power spike, I think, in a deserved way. The fear component, or Terrify, has been changed. Not fear, Terrify. And so basically what used to happen when you would fear someone, or not, it is fear. Fiddlesticks is called Terrify. But this affects Fiddlesticks, Nocturne, and Shaco. And with all of their fears, basically what used to happen is that your opponent would run around randomly. And now what is happening is they are going to be running away with you with impaired movement. So it's like the opposite of an Ari charm. And I think this is a nice change because I know personally, I always thought that, Fiddlesticks' Terrify is like really well known because it's so long, but like the randomness of it was always a little bit annoying. Like I used to play Ezreal a lot in Season 3, and if I had like a Fiddlesticks support, it was always kind of annoying when he would Terrify, and then it was almost impossible to hit a Q because, they're running around randomly, you just never know where they're going to go. So it's harder to hit skill shots. So I think this will be nice because it'll kind of like make it a little more predictable and easier to hit skill shots, and just a little bit more easier to act accordingly. So good stuff here. I think this is a nice change. Fiddlesticks also gets a minor buff to his cast range on his Drain, not too big of a change. Now minor changes, don't necessarily think these are too big. I'm just going to skip them and go to items. Tear of the Goddess got a little bit of a buff, so they took off a little bit of the mana regen, but they gave it a new passive. Now this passive is in addition to the other passive where when you cast spells you gain mana. Now you will gain +1 maximum mana per 8 seconds. So you're getting, it will just stack itself whether or not you cast spells. So I think this will be a little bit of a buff to Tear, and specifically to any of the champions that build Tear. So Ryze, Jace, Blue Ezreal, whatever other champions, maybe Kha'Zix, I don't really know. Any, of the champions who build Tear and rely on it every game, what is his name? There's the top laner, Yorick. He would probably build Tear quite a bit. A little bit of a buff to those champions, so that I think is nice. Tear has been pretty underwhelming. Athene's has been like so overpowering because it's just so much better than the Tear route for mana sustain. So I think we might see some more of that. Doran's Shield got nerfed. Doran's Shield has been extremely overwhelmed. I mean, if you've been playing in top lane or bottom lane lately, you've seen Doran's Shield all over the place on every top laner and almost every support, at least in higher ranks, will build Doran's Shield right off the bat, and it is just such a strong item in terms of reducing auto attack damage, but also just giving a lot of health and a lot of health regen. So they're taking away 20 health and 4 health regen. So basically Doran's Shield is just going to be really good against auto attack based champions, which I think is what it should be, instead of just kind of like the go-to default defensive item. And I also think that this will affect top lane probably more than anything, because a lot of the more defensive tanks, Nasus, Mundo, those types of champions that are weak early and just kind of want to play passively and farm up to the late game, they're going to be a little bit weaker now because they don't have such a strong starting item to help them sustain through the laning phase. So an indirect buff to some of those champions in top lane. The Spirit Stone is getting further tweaked. Spirit Stone, I think they did move it in a very good direction, but it has been very, very strong. This percentage health and mana restore, 8 and 4%, was like insane. I know I've played games like I think I played a Shaco jungle game last week, and, you know, every time I would go gank and kind of get low throughout a fight, I would just go back into the jungle. Even if I had like 100 health, you just throw down a box, and like, you do a full clear, and you're already back to full health. So any of like the high damage junglers were pretty much always at full health and full mana. So they're just kind of toning this down a little bit, 8% to 6%, 4% to 3%, not too big, but bringing it probably a little bit more in line. But then also, it used to be that AoE abilities would give half the health and mana, and that has been taken away. So, AoE clear junglers like Amumu, Shyvana, Diana, anybody else who does kind of like this AoE style clear is going to be, you know, empowered through this change, because, you know, they're going to be getting a lot more health and mana back. So keep an eye out for those junglers to make a resurgence with these Spirit Stone changes. Now, some curious changes to Boots of Mobility. So, it used to give 45 movement speed in combat. 45 is very standard. You know, Merc Treads also gives 45. I think Berserker Greaves also does. So, very, very standard to give your Boots to give you 45 movement speed in combat, but then 105 out of combat. So, you know, you're breaking even in combat, but then when you're out of combat, you're super fast. Well, now you're only getting 25 in combat in the same out of combat, and then a reduced cost. So, but this is a very peculiar change, because now you're actually going to be slower than everybody else when you're actually fighting, which I actually think is a bit of a problem. And I actually think this might be kind of a significant nerf, because this is a big deal. You know, it's one of those things, it kind of reminds me of like Miss Fortune's passive, where, you know, when you're running around and you're, you know, aggressing onto somebody, it's really, really good. But then once you start to take damage and you need to get away, you can't, because you're slow. And so, yeah, definitely a weird change. Makes this item very binary. You know, it's really, really good when you're coming out of the Fog of War to gank somebody or going to ward as a support, but then when you're fighting somebody, all of a sudden you're really weak and really slow. So, peculiar change to Boots of Mobility. I guess we'll see how that goes. And for champions who very much rely on Boots of Mobility, because they want to roam a lot and they want to, you know, be all over the place, certain junglers, this is a big nerf. So kind of keep an eye out on this. You know, they're keeping an eye. I'm a little skeptical about this change, and I wonder why you would still want to get Boots of Mobility after this. Ruby Crystal is health is reduced a little, but the cost is also reduced to 400. So for people who buy Ruby Crystal early, this is a nice change. I wonder if we'll start seeing this as a starting option, you know, especially with the Doran Shield being reduced. I wonder if Ruby Crystal could be a decent starting choice, especially for somebody who really wants to get a Ruby Crystal, maybe like a support or a top laner, you know, who's going to rush Spirit Visage. I wonder if maybe this could be a good choice. So I guess we'll see. And then Sightstone has been changed accordingly to match the change to Ruby Crystal, and then they also changed Ruby Sightstone to give it even more health, and then bring the cost in line as well. I think this was a good change, because I know as a support, a lot of times I will only buy the blue Sightstone and then just sit on it almost indefinitely, because there almost isn't really a reason to upgrade to the Ruby Sightstone. It didn't give you that much more health. It just gave you more ward charges, and you don't really need them all anyways, because you're probably going to back by the time they expire. So I think this is nice, making Ruby Sightstone a better late game option with more health, and it gives you a little more of an incentive to actually make the upgrade, because there's, you know, a meaningful difference between the two. And then next we have a pretty big change to the 3 gold generating items on supports. Overall, I think that they have gone in a nice direction with the changes to the support items, but I definitely think they needed some tweaking. So as it stands currently, I would say that the gold one, Ancient Coin, and then the Talisman is definitely the best choice. You know, it gave very reliable gold generation, and then the ultimate active component of the Talisman is just so good with the speed boost. Base of the Mountain, or the Relic Shield line, is also solid on very tanky supports. But then I felt that the Spell Thief's Frostcleam's Frostfang whatever line has been definitely the weakest. And so they tweaked it. So the Spell Thief's Edge, the idea here is that it wants to be the one that's capable of providing the highest gold generation, but it also is the riskiest. Now, this is true, but I think that it's in a much better spot than it used to be. So it used to also be capable of providing the highest gold generation, but it was a thing where you needed to either damage your opponent through a spell or auto attack, like once every, I don't know, 30 seconds or something like that, to optimally generate the gold. But it made you very predictable because, you know, you would be running up to auto attack or throw a spell at your opponent, you know, almost constantly. And with bottom lane, you know, especially with supports like Leona or Thresh that are just looking for an opportunity to jump on you, if you're playing Sona and you're very predictably running forward to harass, it made you very dangerous. It was very dangerous to buy the Spell Thief's Edge and try and get the gold generation going. So what they've changed is, well, first of all, they added so that your spells and basic attacks deal 10 bonus damage and will also grant 5 gold. This will occur up to 3 times every 30 seconds. This is a nice change in my mind because now you can kind of pick your moment, go in, maybe get an auto attack, a spell, and an auto attack off, get your 3 charges, and then kind of back off and wait for another optimal moment. So now you can kind of play the lane more as it comes to you rather than feel like you're on the timer to try and harass. Makes you less predictable, less easy to be jumped on. Now, to compensate, they're reducing the ability power and the flat mana regen, but it still retains some gold per 10. So I think this is definitely a nice change, and the key is right here. 3 times every 30 seconds. So you have a lot more power as to how you want to actually get the harassment off. Next upgrade gives you 15 additional damage and 10 gold, so that's just kind of adding to these numbers. You know, the flat AP has been reduced, the flat mana regen has been reduced, but you've got this to compensate for it. And then with the ultimate upgrade, so this is kind of an interesting change. So, you know, when your basic attacks and spells will deal 15 additional damage, grant 10 gold. Now this is a little interesting. Killing minions does not disable the passive. This kind of makes me wonder if this could be useful on laners, because, you know, it doesn't make sense to buy these items in lane because you are going to be harassing your opponent, so you'll never really get the passive to kick in because it gets disabled. But now it doesn't get disabled, so I wonder if the Frost Queen's Claim actually could be a nice gold-generating item for laners. But then the ultimate active, Fire an Ice Lance that explodes. So this will, you know, deal a fairly low amount of damage, and then a nice 80% slow over that decays over 2 seconds on a 60-second cooldown. So the active I still think is a little bit weak. You could maybe use this as kind of like extra peel on a slow, you know, like somebody like Sona or Annie, who doesn't necessarily always have on-demand crowd control without their ultimate, or with Annie, her passive. So maybe this could kind of enhance those types of supports. But then also a really nice change is that it gives 10% CDR. This is really, really good because CDR is so good on supports in general. And so, you know, wherever they can get it is a nice buff. So overall, I do think that the Frost Queen's Claim is in a much better place than it used to be. And I can definitely see how this could be a nice buff to the supports that can benefit from this. I think the best ones would be Sona, Annie, and Lulu are probably the best 3. Maybe Nami in there as well. You know, range supports that want AP and are going to be harassing in lane quite effectively, you know, especially against the Leonas and the Threshes, you know, and the, you know, those hard engaged supports. You need to be able to poke them down, so this could be a viable choice there. The Relic Shield line did get a tweak as well. So they, first of all, gave it more base health, but then took away the health regen. But then they kind of built the health regen into the passive. So if you kill a minion, you will heal your ally champion for 40 and will grant them gold. But then a really nice change is they added this clarity passive. So allies who actually gain the charge will give +1 to their minion score. This is really nice because there are a lot of times in lane when you kind of hit tab to see how the lanes are going, and you'll notice that like you feel like you've been doing really well in bottom lane, but your AD carry has less CS than the opposing AD carry, and it's like, how can this be? I thought we were doing really well. Well, that's because the support has like 20 or 30 CS, so you know that's 20 or 30 that the AD carry doesn't have, but they do because they got the gold, but you just can't see it. So this will be nice to kind of indicate how well you're doing better to your team. Moving on to the Targon's Embrace upgrade. So again, this is going to heal your allied champion, you and your allied champion for 50, and grant them the gold as well. Health regen has been reduced to kind of compensate. And then the Face of the Mountain. Let's see here. So okay, so yeah, so the big change was here. And also the health regen has become percentage based of your maximum health, so that's really nice. But the big change here is to the active. So you'll shield your ally for 10% of your maximum health, and then it will explode, and it will deal 100% of their total attack damage plus 30% of their ability power. So this is nice because if you put this shield on your AD carry or your AP carry, the explosion will deal damage instead of based on your health, which I think is what it used to be. It will be based on their stats. So, if you've got a really fed AD carry, the incentive to put this on this is really high because they're going to have a lot of attack damage. It's like a 300 or 400, damaging nuke, which could be really powerful. So, really, really nice. Also gives 10% CDR. I don't know if it used to, but that's really nice. I think it did. I'm not 100% sure. But overall, a nice change. I think Face of the Mountain, again, is going to be a really solid choice for those tanky supports, Leona, Alistair, Taric, really strong choice, and I think it definitely can compete with the others. And then the Ancient Coin line, it kind of got a little bit of a nerf, a tweak, I guess. So this is definitely the most passive and sustain one, and really you're just wanting this for the talisman at the end. So here we've got being near a minion will grant you gold, but instead of giving you health regen, the health regen is built into the gold generation. So whenever a minion dies, you gain gold and health. Same change up here, tweaking the stats to compensate. And then, yeah, the same as well with the ultimate talisman. But again, you're really buying the talisman for the 20% CDR and for the active. So those are the changes to the support items. I definitely think that they're more balanced. The blue one was definitely the worst, and now it's been buffed up to kind of match. I think they made some nice changes to the Face of the Mountain line to make it more fitting. This is a nice change, making the damage scale off of the ally you shield. So some nice stuff here. So overall, not a huge patch, but some nice changes, I think, and some good stuff. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.